In this video, I'll be demonstrating how to use Blender to make this animation of text with a bright light in the background. I'll be using Blender version 2.8. This tutorial assumes that your computer has both a number pad and a 3-button mouse. If your computer lacks either or both, refer to my Introduction to Blender video. If you do not know how to zoom, pan, and/or rotate in the 3D viewport, also refer to my Introduction to Blender. Let's start by creating a new project. So from the File menu, select New and then General. I'm going to turn on screencast keys so that you can see what keys I'm pressing. To start, left-click on the cube to make sure that it's selected, and then delete it by pressing X and then clicking on Delete. Now let's add some text, so press Shift-A and select Text. I'll zoom in to see it better. To make the text stand up, we'll rotate it on the X-axis, so press R, then X, then 90, then Enter. To edit the text, press Tab to enter edit mode. Now use the backspace key to delete the text and enter in your own text. I'm going to type Blender. The word or words should be between 5 and 9 characters for the best effect. Do not use any characters that are partially drawn below the bottom of a normal character, such as J or Y. Press Tab to return to object mode. Now let's add some thickness to the text, so click on the Object Data button. Then open the Geometry section. I'm going to use an extrude value of 0.1. Next, let's bevel the edges by entering a Bevel Depth value. I'm going to use 0.02. Then set the resolution to 3 to round out and smooth the beveled edges. If you set the resolution value to 0, you will only see the effect of the bevel depth value. Now I'm going to increase the spacing between the letters. To do that, come down to the paragraph section and change the character spacing to 1.4. Next, let's set the material for the text, so click on the Material button. Then click New. Change the surface type from Principled BSDF to Anisotropic BSDF. You may need to scroll to bring the anisotropic shader into view. Now click here to set the color. If you want to use the same color that I'm using, then click on the hex button and enter 001679. This will give us a blue color. Next, set the roughness to 0.2. When I'm working in the 3D viewport, I like my objects to have the same general color as they will in the final movie, so open the Viewport Display section. Click here to set the color, and click on the Ink Dropper tool. Now we can click on the blue color to copy it. Now press 5 on the number pad to switch from perspective to orthographic view. Then press 1 on the number pad to switch to front view. I'll zoom in a little. Now let's add a floor for the text to sit on. So press Shift-A and select Mesh and then Plane. I'll rotate the view a little so that you can see it better. Then scale it up in size by pressing S, then 15, then Enter. Now press 1 on the number pad to switch to front view. Next, press T once or twice until the Quick Tools menu is visible. Click on the Move tool. Then grab the arrow and move the floor until it's at the bottom of the text. Next, let's set the material for the floor, so click the New button. Change the surface type from Principled BSDF to Diffuse BSDF. Click here to set the color and enter 303030. This will give us a dark gray color. Next, set the roughness to 0. Open the Viewport Display section if it is not already open. Click here to set the color, and click on the Ink Dropper tool. Now we can click on the gray color to copy it. Now let's set up the lighting. So zoom out until you can see the lamp, and then left-click on it to select it. Next, left-click and drag to move the lamp to the center of the text. This technique will not work all the time, but it does now because the Move tool is selected. If it is not working for you, press G and use the mouse to move the lamp, confirming by left-clicking. Now press 7 on the number pad to switch to top view. Then drag the lamp behind the text. I'm pulling mine back until the distance between the lamp and the text is about the same distance as the width of the text. Now zoom out until you can see the edges of the floor, and then left-click on it to select it. Then grab the arrow and drag the floor until it's overlapping the lamp by just a little bit. Next, press 1 on the number pad to switch to front view, and zoom in. I'll rotate the view so you can see this a little better. Now left-click on the lamp to select it. Then click on the Object Data button if it's not already selected. Make sure that the point lamp is selected, and the radius is set to 0.1. The smaller the radius is, the sharper the edges of the shadows will be. Now set the power value to 10,000. To get an idea of what this looks like so far, click the rendered icon among the viewport shading selections. Also click on the Gizmos and Overlays buttons to hide them respectively. You'll notice that the reflection on the side of the R is only reflecting a small area. You can see the same thing on the upper flat part of the D. So to make the reflections look better, left-click on the text to select it. To make sure that it's selected, you can locate it in the outliner and then verify that text is highlighted. Now click the Object Modifiers button. Then click Add Modifier and select Edge Split. Now the text is reflecting light the way that I would expect it to. Next, let's make the background color darker, so click on the World button. Then click the color and set the hex value to 252525. Now is a good time to save what I've done so far. So from the File menu, I'll select Save As. Navigate to your desired directory. I'm going to name this bright star underscore last name dot blend. Now click on Save as Blender file. Now we're going to add the bright light source that will be seen in the background. The lamp that we set up earlier is being used to light our scene and to create the shadows, but it's not directly visible in the rendered image. So now we're going to add a different light source that will be visible in the background. The new light source is going to be a sphere, and we want it to be located at about the same position as our lamp. To do that, select Solid from the Viewport Shading selections. Also click on the Gizmos and Overlays buttons to show them respectively. Then left-click on the lamp to select it. Then press Shift-S to open the Snap Pie menu, and select Cursor to Selected. This will move the 3D cursor to the lamp. Now press Shift-A and select Mesh, and then UV Sphere. Then shrink it down in size by pressing S, then 0.05, then Enter. Then grab the green arrow and move it back until it's just a little bit behind the lamp. This will prevent the sphere from blocking the lamp. Next, let's set the material for the sphere. So click on the Material button, and then click New. Change the surface type to Emission. You may need to scroll to bring the emission shader into view. The emission shader emits light, and the strength value controls the intensity. Set the strength value to 1000. This value will make the sphere the brightest object in the scene. We'll keep the color set to white. Now let's set up the camera view, so press 0 on the number pad. This is the view looking through the camera. I'll zoom in a little. Now let's lock the camera to the view. To do that, press N to open the Properties panel, and click on the View tab. and then put a check mark next to Lock Camera to View. Then press N again to close the Properties panel. Now I can zoom, pan, and rotate while looking through the camera. Now, during the animation, we're going to be zooming and rotating the camera. In order to keep the text centered while doing this, we can set up the camera to track the center of the text. To accomplish this, I'll first place an empty object at the center of the text, and then set up the camera to track the empty object. So press Shift A and select Empty, and then Plane Axes. The empty object doesn't contain any geometry, so it will not be visible in our final render. It just represents a point in space. Now I'll press 1 on the number pad to switch to front view. Then use the arrows to position the object at the center of the N, if it's not there already. Next, press 3 on the number pad to switch to right side view, and zoom out until you can see both the text and the empty object. Then use the arrows to position the empty object at the center of the text. Now press 0 on the number pad to switch to camera view. Next, we're going to set up the camera to track the empty object. So find the camera in the outliner and click on it to select it. Then click on the Constraints button. Next, click on Add Object Constraint and select Track To. Then click in the entry box to display a list of objects that we can track and select Empty. The camera axis that we want to point toward the empty object is the -Z axis, so click the -Z button. Then change the up value to Y. Now the empty object will stay centered in the camera view. You can see this if I rotate the view. If you wanted the camera to be centered on a different location, then all you need to do is move the empty object to a different location. Now let's set up the animation. So rotate the view until the light is on the right side of the text. The light should also be a little below the top of the last letter in the text. I'm going to zoom out a little. This will be the starting point of the animation. Now we're going to set a keyframe for the camera. So find the camera in the outliner and make sure that it's selected. Then make sure that the frame number is set to frame 1. Now put the mouse cursor over the camera view window and press I. Then select Location Rotation. Now the location and rotation of the camera is set for frame 1. If you expand the timeline panel by dragging upward on its upper edge, you can see that there is an orange rhombus at frame 1, which means that a keyframe has been set for that frame. Now set the frame number to 100. Then zoom in and rotate the view until the light source is between the B and the L. Then press I and select Location Rotation. Next, set the end frame for the animation to 120. Now if you click on the play button, you can watch how the animation will move. Next, select Rendered from the Viewport Shading selections so that we can see what this looks like as a rendered image. Also click on the Gizmos and Overlay buttons to hide them respectively. I'm going to save what I've done so far, so from the File menu, click Save. Now we're going to set up the background light to look like a very bright light. We'll be adding some light streaks to the sphere by using a glare filter. So select Compositing from among the layouts. Then add a check mark next to Use Nodes. I can close this property panel by pressing N. This is the Render Layers node, and it's currently outputting our render layer. The Composite node is used for our final output. In order to see what we're doing better, let's add a Viewer node. So press Shift A and select Output and then Viewer. Now whatever we connect to the Viewer node's image input will be displayed in this background area. So let's connect the render layer's image output to the Viewer image input. Next, we'll need to change the render engine from Eevee to Cycles. Eevee approximates Cycles, so it is useful for viewport renders, but Cycles does a more accurate job rendering overall. To do this, click on the Render button and change this from Eevee to Cycles. To speed up the rendering process, set the render value to 10 in the sampling section. Also click on the Output button and change the percent value to 50. Now from the Render menu, select Render Image to render the image, and the viewer will display it in the background. If a pop-up window containing the image appears, close it. If you want to zoom out on the background, then press V. You can zoom in by pressing Alt-V. We're going to apply a glare filter to the light in the background, but we don't want the glare filter to be applied to anything else, so we're going to use a math node to separate the light from the rest of the scene. So press Shift-A and select Converter, and then Math. Then move it over the connection between the Render Layers node and the viewer, and press the left mouse button to drop it into place. Since the light source is the brightest object in the scene, we're going to use the greater than function to separate it from the rest of the scene. So click here and select greater than. You may need to scroll to bring it into view. Now when you increase this value, you can see part of the scene disappear. So keep increasing it until the light source is the only thing visible. I'm going to set it to a little over 260. Next, let's add a glare filter. So press Shift-A and select Filter and then Glare. Then drop it on the connection between the Math node and the viewer. Make sure that the type is set to streaks. Change the iterations value from 3 to 5 to increase the accuracy. Then change the threshold value to 0. Now we can see the streaks. Next, change the number of streaks to 7. Now let's make the streaks longer by increasing the fade value. I'm going to increase it to 0.94. Now let's add another glare filter. An easy way to do that is to duplicate the glare filter that we already have, so press Shift-D to duplicate it. Then drop it on the connection between the glare filter node and the viewer. This not only added another glare filter, but it duplicated the settings as well. Now let's make a few changes to the duplicate glare filter, so set the number of streaks to 8. Then let's rotate the streaks a little, so set the angle offset to 20. Now shorten the length of the streaks by setting the fade value to 0.9. Now I'm going to make some extra room to work, so I'll click on this triangle to minimize the glare filter. I'll do it for the other one as well. So what we have now is a light source with streaks at the output of this glare filter. If you connect the Render Layers node to the viewer, then you can see the scene without the light streaks. So now we're going to combine this view with the glare filter output. So press Shift-A and select Color and then Mix. Then drop it on the connection between the Render Layers node and the Composite node. Then connect the output of this glare filter to the Mix node input. Then, to see what this looks like, connect the output of the Mix node to the viewer. Now change the Mix type to Add. You may need to scroll to bring it into view. Now we have the light streaks included in the scene. Now is a good time to save what I have so far. So from the File menu, click Save. Next, let's switch back to the default layout. Select Solid from the Viewport Shading selections and click on the Gizmos and Overlays buttons to show them respectively. Now let's set up some rendering options. so click on the Render button. Again, the larger the number of render samples is, the better the quality will be, but the longer it will take to render. I'm going to set the number of render samples to 50. Since we're going to be rendering 120 frames, I'm going to keep this value pretty low to help minimize the rendering time. Now come down here to the Performance section and change both the tiles X and tiles Y values to 256. This accelerates the rendering process when a GPU is involved. Now click on the Output button, and then change the percent value to 100. Next, change the frame rate to 30 frames per second. Now come down to the Output section. Click here to set the file format. There are multiple movie formats that you can choose from. I'm going to use AVI JPEG. Now we're ready to render the animation, so save the project.
As a current member of Blender Club, Steven will render your animations for you.
Open up your web browser and log into Google Drive. Navigate to the Blender Club shared folder, and then this school year, and then the current meet. Now come up here and click on New, and select File Upload. Navigate to your project file. Well, that concludes this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you look forward to viewing your movie next week.